Hit that like button and subscribe, because today we're diving headfirst into the weird and wacky world of history. Ever wondered what people did before Netflix? Spoiler alert, it involved some pretty gruesome punishments and bizarre myths that make today's reality TV look downright tame. Let's start with a question. Did you know that in medieval Europe, you could be punished for stealing a loaf of bread by being hanged? Or how about this gem? People actually believed in a creature called the basilisk, which could kill you just by looking at you. Seriously, who needs horror movies when you have ancient mythology? Now, if you think your job is tough, imagine being a medieval knight whose idea of a good time involved jousting with sharpened sticks or risking it all in a battle against a dragon. Yes, dragons. And let's not forget about the delightful practice of trial by ordeal, where you might have to stick your hand in boiling water to prove your innocence. Talk about an extreme job interview. But wait, there's more. Did you know that in ancient Rome, there were actual festivals dedicated to the worship of, well, let's just say, very interesting sexual curiosities? Festivals that included all sorts of debauchery, where normal was just a suggestion. So, are you ready to learn about bizarre facts like the Great Stink of 1858 or the Dancing Plague of 1518? Trust me, you'll want to stick around for specific dates and wild stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the past. And hey, if all this history talk makes you feel sleepy, just turn on loop so this episode plays again and again until you drift off into a world of medieval nightmares. Let's get weird. Ah, the Vikings. Those Norse marauders of the 8th to 11th centuries, known for their fearsome raids, longships, and, of course, their impressive beards. But while most history buffs are busy recounting their pillaging ways, we're here to explore a topic that's been tragically overlooked: Viking beard grooming standards and the rather alarming mortality rates that accompanied them. So grab your horned helmet, and let's dive into the hairy details. The earliest records, a hairy beginning. Our journey begins in the lively year of 793 AD, when the Vikings first struck terror into the hearts of Christian Europe by raiding the Lindisfarne monastery in Northumbria. What's notable, however, is not just the blood and gold but the glorious beards that these men sported. Imagine the scene: seafaring warriors, longboats glistening like sharpened daggers, and beards flowing like the waves. But how did they maintain such magnificent manes? According to the Gesta Danorum by Saxo Grammaticus, written around 1200 AD, we learn that Viking men had a peculiar obsession with hair. They would keep their beards trimmed and styled to fit societal standards, which was a bit rich for a group known for their penchant for chaos. A well-groomed beard was a mark of status. But how did they achieve such splendid results? Beard grooming tools, the Viking barber's toolkit. Viking barbers were the unsung heroes of the Norse world, wielding an arsenal of tools that would make any modern barber green with envy. Here's a quick list of what you might find in a typical Norse grooming kit. 1. Bone combs, perfect for detangling knots while also doubling as a handy weapon in a pinch. Talk about multifunctional. 2. Clam shells, used for scraping and shaping, because nothing says, I care about my appearance, like a crustacean's leftovers. 3. Tweezers. Yes, they plucked. Who knew Vikings had concerns about unsightly nose hairs? 4. Scissors. Made of iron, these bad boys could slice through even the bushiest of beards. 5. Razors. Often made from iron and fashioned into sharp blades, these were essential for any Viking looking to maintain a clean-cut look. But here's a question for you. Was it worth it to risk a trip to the barber, knowing that your mortality rate was about to skyrocket? Mortality rates, a hair-raising statistic. Let's talk numbers. The average life expectancy of a Viking male was around 30 to 40 years. Yes, you heard that right. Clearly, Viking beard grooming was not just an aesthetic choice, it was a battle against the odds. The following factors contributed to their alarming mortality rates. Raids and warfare. The life of a Viking was about as safe as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. According to historian Peter Sawyer, about 25% of Viking men died in combat by their mid-30s. Disease. With limited medical knowledge, a simple cut from a grooming mishap could lead to a nasty infection. Did you know that 50% of all Viking men suffered at least one serious injury? Talk about getting caught in the crossfire of your own beard trimmer. Harsh conditions. With their homes in Scandinavia, these guys faced brutal winters. With no indoor heating and a diet primarily of fish and porridge, it's a wonder they even made it to the barber. Absurd anecdotes, the hairy truth. If you think Viking life was all about glory and battles, you're sorely mistaken. There are some downright absurd anecdotes about their grooming habits that are worth noting. In 850 AD, a Viking chieftain named Bjorn Ironside famously declared that the longer the beard, the greater the man. To prove his point, he challenged his fellow warriors to grow their beards longer than a dragon boat. The result? A contest that led to one unfortunate lad being mistaken for a yeti and chased out of a village. Who knew a beard could be such a social liability? And then there's the infamous tale of Ragnar Lothbrok, who was said to have washed his beard in the blood of his enemies. Now, while that might sound like a great way to keep things clean, can you imagine the reactions from the local barber? Do you want the usual, or are you feeling a bit bloody today? Curious practices, grooming rituals. Viking grooming rituals were as colorful as their raids. They believed that a well-kept beard brought favor from the gods. So how did they ensure divine blessings upon their facial hair? 1. Beard oil. Made from fish blubber and herbs, Viking men would lather this concoction on their beards. Nothing screams manly like a fishy aroma wafting through the air. 2. Ceremonial trimming. Before heading into battle, warriors would gather for a ritualistic beard trimming, believing that it would grant them strength. Imagine the camaraderie in the barber's chair, for Odin and my beard. 3. Lice removal. Yes, you read that right. Vikings were particularly concerned about lice infestation, so much so that a comb was often a warrior's best friend. If your beard became a home for bugs, you were basically signing your own death warrant. 4. Beard dyes. Some Vikings even dyed their beards with natural pigments. A 10th century saga mentions a Viking named Rolf who dyed his beard blue to intimidate his foes. How's that for a fashion statement? The evolution of grooming standards, from berserker to civilized. As we move through the 11th century, Viking grooming standards began to shift. With the Christianization of Scandinavia, the long, wild beard trend started to fade, replaced with a more refined look. In 1066, when Harald Hardrada attempted to take over England, his groomed beard was considered a symbol of his royal status. It's said that during this time, a clean-shaven look became the norm for those wishing to be seen as civilized. But let's be real, was it really necessary to sacrifice your beard for the sake of appearances? The final cut, mortality and beards collide. By the end of the Viking Age in the late 11th century, the mortality rates had begun to decline, thanks in part to improved living conditions and the advent of better medical practices. But what about the beards? They became a symbol of nostalgia for a time when men were warriors. Interestingly, Viking women also played a role in the grooming standards, often being the ones to trim their husbands' beards. Can you imagine the arguments? Honey, do you really need to take off that much? I'm trying to look fierce here. Conclusion: a legacy of beards and battles. So what have we learned from this rather hairy history? Viking beard grooming practices were as intricate as their battle strategies, and their mortality rates were shockingly high. But through the absurd anecdotes, curious practices, and the ever-evolving standards of grooming, one thing remains clear: the Vikings were a people who took their appearances seriously, even in the face of impending doom. As we look back on their legacy, let's not forget the bravery of those who faced the perils of life with a well-groomed beard. So the next time you see a man sporting a mighty mane, just remember, he could be channeling his inner Viking, ready to raid, or simply ready to hit the nearest barber. #### The monotonous history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates. When we think of Vikings, images of fierce warriors with flowing beards and horned helmets often come to mind. Yet, beneath their rugged exterior lay a surprisingly sophisticated approach to grooming, construction, and bureaucracy, interwoven with the realities of mortality rates. This exploration will dive into the meticulous standards they adhered to for beard grooming, the construction methods and materials they employed for their grooming kits, the bureaucratic structures that governed their societies, and the surprising roles that emerged from these practices, all while maintaining a brisk pace that would make even a Norse god raise an eyebrow in delight. #### Beard grooming standards, a matter of status. In the Viking Age, which spanned from roughly 793 to 1066 AD, a well-groomed beard was not merely a matter of vanity, it was a reflection of one's social status and masculinity. The grooming standards were so rigorously adhered to that one could argue they rivaled the codes of chivalry that emerged later in medieval Europe. #### Construction methods and materials. Vikings crafted their grooming tools with a meticulousness that would make even the most detail-oriented modern barber blush. The primary materials included bone and antler, often sourced from the remains of their hunts. Vikings fashioned combs and other tools from these materials. A finely carved antler comb could cost upwards of 2 silver coins, equivalent to a week's wage for a lower-class Viking. Wood, ash and birch were popular choices for creating grooming kits, with wooden boxes designed to hold various tools. These were often decorated with intricate carvings, which added an aesthetic flair to functionality. Iron, for the more affluent Vikings, iron razors and scissors became symbols of status. A well-made iron razor could reach prices of 5 silver coins, putting it firmly in the realm of luxury items. The construction of these tools involved skilled artisans, often barbers by trade, who could spend weeks perfecting a single piece. The gathering of materials was governed by the seasonal cycles, with hunting peaks aligning with the demand for grooming tools. ####costs of grooming. The costs associated with grooming in Viking society could be substantial. Commoners might spend 2 to 3 silver coins for a basic grooming kit, while a chieftain's set could exceed 15 silver coins. That might seem excessive, but to put that in perspective, it was a small price to pay for avoiding the scorn of a judgmental Viking community. After all, nothing says, "I'm ready for battle," quite like a well-groomed beard. ###bureaucratic rules and punishments. Viking society was not as anarchic as many might assume. It had its own set of bureaucratic norms and regulations. The Thing, an assembly of free men, would gather to debate laws, settle disputes, and enforce rules that included grooming standards. ###rules and regulations. Grooming codes. There were unwritten but widely understood codes regarding beard length and style. A beard must be kept at least 3 finger widths long. Failure to comply could result in social ostracism or, in extreme cases, a fine. Public appearance. Vikings were expected to present themselves well, especially during feast days and raids. A scruffy beard could tarnish a warrior's reputation. ###punishments. Punishments for neglecting grooming standards could be harsh. Fines. Minor infractions would often result in fines, typically 1 to 2 silver coins, payable to the local chieftain. Social exile. More severe cases, such as repeated offenses, could lead to temporary exile from the community, an almost certain death sentence in a time when community and kinship were paramount. ###roles and job descriptions. With the high standards of grooming came specialized roles within Viking society. Not all were warriors. Many contributed to the grooming culture in ways that were both vital and, frankly, quite entertaining. Barber, skegmer, responsible for cutting hair and beards. A skilled barber could earn significant respect, and their services were often in high demand before raids or during festivals. Grooming artisan, hermar. This artisan specialized in creating high-quality grooming tools. Their workshops were often bustling, and the best craftsmen could command prices that would make a modern-day barber blush. Apothecary, Lakener. While primarily focused on healing, apothecaries often provided herbal oils and balms to condition beards. They were the original purveyors of beard oil, though they likely didn't market it with the same pizzazz of today's grooming brands. Social critic, griari, a designated role that might seem unnecessary today. The griari critiqued grooming standards and could publicly shame those who fell short. It was a position rife with potential for witty remarks and social commentary. Think of it as the Viking version of a modern-day influencer. Hashtag technical specs and inventories. The technical specifications of a Viking grooming kit could be quite intricate. A typical grooming kit might include 1. Antler comb, length, 6 inches, width, 2 inches, teeth, 1 to 2 millimeters apart, perfect for detangling without snagging. 2. Iron razor, blade length, 3 inches, thickness, 2 millimeters, handle, wrapped in leather for grip. The precision of the blade made it a favorite among warriors preparing for battle. 3. Wooden box, dimensions, 10 inches x 4 inches x 3 inches, often decorated with carvings depicting Norse mythology, serving as both storage and art. 4. Herbal oils, a blend of lavender, cedar, and juniper was commonly used. Measured in small clay jars, these oils were prized for their conditioning properties. 5. Scissors, length, 5 inches, sharpness, honed to perfection. The scissors were often the secret weapon of the barber, allowing for precise beard shaping. Hashtag inventories. A typical inventory for a well-off Viking might look like this. 1 antler comb. 1 iron razor. 1 pair of scissors. 2 jars of herbal oils. 1 decorative wooden box. The cost of this kit could range from 15 to 30 silver coins, depending on the intricacy of the designs and the quality of materials used. Hashtag mortality rates, the grim reality. While grooming standards flourished, the Viking Age was not without its dark realities. Mortality rates were frighteningly high, especially during raids, and the harsh living conditions took their toll. Hashtag mortality statistics. Infant mortality. Historical estimates suggest that up to 30% of infants did not survive past their first year due to diseases and malnutrition. Warrior fatalities. During raids, mortality rates could soar to 50% for participating warriors, especially in poorly executed attacks. The famous Battle of Stiklestad in 1030 saw a mortality rate of 40% for the attacking forces alone. Health issues. The average life expectancy of a Viking was around 30 to 40 years, with many succumbing to infections, injuries, or the harsh climate of Scandinavia. A well-groomed beard would do little to ward off an untimely fate from a Viking equivalent of the common cold. Hashtag conclusion, a legacy of beards and bureaucracy. The history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates is a surprisingly rich tapestry of social norms, construction methods, and the very real struggles of life in a brutal age. From the artisans crafting intricate grooming tools to the social critics enforcing standards, each role was vital in maintaining the cultural fabric of Viking society. While the high mortality rates cast a shadow over their accomplishments, the pursuit of grooming perfection provided a glimpse into their values and priorities. After all, if you're going to face the afterlife, you might as well do it with a well-groomed beard. In the end, the legacy of Viking grooming standards serves as a reminder that even the fiercest warriors had their soft spots, whether it was for a good beard oil or the need to conform to societal expectations. So the next time you see a well-groomed beard, remember, it might just be a nod to the Vikings who paved the way for modern grooming standards, albeit with a slightly less bureaucratic flair. The monotonous history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates. Ah, the Vikings! Fierce warriors, skilled navigators, and, let's not forget, renowned for their rather impressive beards. But beneath the surface of these iconic facial adornments lies a surprisingly intricate history of grooming standards, mortality rates, and the bureaucracy that governed them. So, strap on your helmets, and maybe a bit of beard oil, as we embark on this brisk journey through the ages. ### construction methods and materials. Beards worthy of Valhalla, 793-1066 AD. The Viking Age, spanning from 793 to 1066 AD, was characterized not only by raids and exploration but also by a burgeoning interest in personal grooming. Viking beards were not merely an aesthetic choice, they were a symbol of status, masculinity, and, dare we say, hygiene. Materials used *. 1. Combs * made from bone, wood, or antlers. Viking combs were essential in maintaining the untamed mane. These combs often featured intricate carvings, showcasing the artisan skills of their makers. 2. Oils and balms * derived from animal fats and plant oils. These grooming products were used to soften the beard and provide a pleasing aroma. Some enterprising Vikings even imported exotic oils from the Mediterranean. 3. Scissors and razors * often fashioned from iron. These tools were critical for trimming. The Vikings had a keen sense of style, employing shears for sharp lines and razors for clean shaves. 4. Beard rings and accessories * aesthetic enhancement was crucial. Decorative rings made from silver or bronze were popular among the upper echelons of Viking society. Costs *. Grooming was not an expense to be taken lightly. A simple wooden comb could cost the equivalent of a day's labor, while luxurious metal accessories could drain the coffers of even the wealthiest chieftains. Imagine a Viking walking into a market, contemplating whether to splurge on a fancy comb or save for the next raid. Tough choices, much like deciding between a mead or a horn of ale. ### bureaucratic rules and punishments. The Beard Code of Conduct, 9th century. While you might picture Vikings as wild and free, they had a code of conduct that extended beyond the battlefield. Enter the Beard Code of the 9th century, a series of bureaucratic rules governing grooming standards and, interestingly enough, the consequences for neglecting them. Rules * 1. Length regulations * beards were expected to reach a certain length to signify maturity and masculinity. A beard deemed too scraggly could result in public shaming or mandatory trimming. 2. Grooming frequency * the Beard Code mandated that men groom their beards at least twice a week. Failure to comply could lead to a fine, payable in silver or livestock, a hefty price when you consider the value of a good cow. 3. Beard competitions. Communities often held contests for the best groomed beard, with winners receiving honors or gifts. Losing, however, could result in a lifetime of ribbing, pun intended. Punishments. 1. Public shaming. Offenders could be subjected to ridicule in the town square, with fellow Vikings delighting in their misfortune. 2. Fines. Repeat offenders faced increasing fines, which could lead to financial ruin, ironically, the very opposite of what they sought to achieve with their grooming. 3. Exile. In extreme cases, particularly egregious neglect could result in banishment from the community. Just think of it, you let your beard go unkempt for too long. Off to the wilderness with you. Hashtag roles and job descriptions, the beard economy, 10th century. With the rise of grooming standards came the need for specialized roles within Viking society. The beard economy flourished, giving rise to a variety of jobs dedicated to maintaining the majestic Viking beard. Roles. 1. Beard groomer. Often a highly respected position, these individuals were akin to modern-day barbers, specializing in beard maintenance, styling, and even providing grooming advice. 2. Beard merchants. Entrepreneurs who sourced combs, oils, and accessories from distant lands. They were the trendsetters, often influencing regional styles. 3. Craftsmen. Skilled artisans who crafted combs and scissors, these individuals were essential in providing the necessary tools for grooming. Their inventories could rival that of a modern hardware store. 4. Grooming inspectors. Tasked with enforcing the beard code, these inspectors ensured that all men met the grooming standards. A grueling job, indeed, as they had to inspect beards in all manners of weather. Hashtag technical specs and inventories, a beard's best friend, 11th century. As the Viking Age progressed, so did the technical specifications of grooming tools and the corresponding inventories maintained by craftsmen and merchants alike. Technical specs. 1. Combs. Length. Typically around 15 to 20 centimeters. Material. Bone or wood, often with decorative engravings. Teeth. 2 to 5 mm apart, designed to detangle without ripping. 2. Scissors. Length. 10 to 15 centimeters, often with intricate designs on the handle. Material. Iron, with wooden or bone grips for comfort. 3. Razors. Length. Approximately 20 to 25 centimeters, designed for both facial and beard grooming. Material. Steel, often forged by local blacksmiths with great precision. 4. Oils and balms. Ingredients. Animal fats, herbs, and occasionally exotic imports. Container. Small leather pouches or wooden boxes for easy transport. Inventories. Viking merchants often kept meticulous records of their grooming supplies, detailing quantities and origins. A typical inventory might read: 100 bone combs, 20 from Norway, 80 from trade with the British Isles. 50 iron scissors, crafted locally. 200 vials of oil, mixed with local herbs. 30 decorative beard rings, imported from Frankish lands. ### mortality rates, the beard's hidden dangers, 793-1066 AD. Despite their impressive grooming standards, Vikings faced high mortality rates due to various factors, including warfare, diseases, and, surprisingly, grooming accidents. Factors contributing to mortality *. 1. Warfare *. The most obvious threat, with battles often leading to high casualties. The life expectancy for a Viking warrior was notoriously low, averaging around 30 to 40 years. 2. Infections *. With limited medical knowledge, minor injuries sustained while grooming, like cuts from razors, could lead to severe infections. A rogue beard grooming incident could quickly escalate into an untimely demise. 3. Lifestyle *. The Viking lifestyle, characterized by long voyages and harsh living conditions, took its toll. Poor nutrition and exposure to the elements contributed to a shorter life expectancy. 4. Alcohol consumption *. While not grooming related, the Vikings' love for mead and ale often led to accidents, injuries, and, well, many a regrettable decision, like that time Bjorn tried to trim his beard after 3 horns of ale. ### Conclusion, the legacy of Viking beard grooming standards. So, what have we learned from this riveting tale of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates? As amusing as it is to consider the bureaucratic oversight of beard length and grooming frequency, it underscores a deeper truth about Viking society: they valued appearance, status, and hygiene as much as they valued their fierce reputations on the battlefield. The meticulous construction of grooming tools, the bureaucratic rules governing beards, the diverse roles within the beard economy, and the sobering mortality rates create a rich tapestry of Viking life that goes beyond mere raiding and pillaging. In the end, the Vikings might have been known for their ferocity, but they were also champions of grooming, fighting for their right to a well-kept beard. So, the next time you see a Viking replete with a glorious beard, remember the history that lies behind the facial hair. After all, they didn't just conquer lands, they conquered the art of grooming too. ### The monotonous history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates. The Viking Age, spanning from approximately 793 to 1066 AD, was a time of exploration, conquest, and surprisingly intricate personal grooming standards. While many might envision Vikings as brutish warriors clad in furs, wielding axes, they were also meticulous about their appearance, particularly their beards. Let's delve into the details of Viking beard grooming standards, alongside the somber reality of mortality rates, and explore the fascinating interplay of construction methods, bureaucratic roles, and technical specifications that defined this era. ### Construction methods and materials. The Viking approach to grooming involved a variety of tools and materials, much like their home construction, which was a blend of practicality and artistry. Most grooming implements were crafted from materials readily available in their environment. 1. Tools. Combs, made of bone or wood, Viking combs were often intricately carved. The earliest examples date back to the 8th century, and their designs could range from simple to ornate. Razors, iron razors, emerging around 900 AD, were a prized possession, reflecting the owner's wealth and status. The average cost of a good quality razor could set a Viking back around 2 to 3 silver coins, equivalent to a week's wages for a skilled laborer. Scissors, while not as common as razors, some Vikings used iron scissors, especially notable in urban centers like Dublin and York. 2. Materials. Soap. Surprisingly, Vikings had a rudimentary form of soap made from animal fats and ashes, which helped maintain beard hygiene. Oils and balms, derived from plant sources, these were used to condition beards and maintain their luster. Flaxseed oil was particularly favored for its moisturizing properties. #######bureaucratic rules and punishments. No society can thrive without a dose of bureaucracy, and the Vikings were no exception. The governance of grooming standards was often intertwined with broader social norms and regional laws. 1. Grooming codes. The Grágás, a collection of laws from Iceland around the 13th century, stipulated that all free men must maintain a respectable appearance. This included grooming one's beard, which was considered a marker of social status. Punishments for neglecting one's beard could range from fines, usually 1 silver coin, to public shaming. Imagine being paraded through the village with the title, Beardless Blunderer, not quite the warrior's glory. 2. Regional variances. The standards could vary significantly between regions. In coastal areas, a wild, unkempt beard was seen as a sign of a fierce warrior. In contrast, the inland farmers might be expected to maintain a more refined appearance. ###### roles and job descriptions. Within Viking society, grooming went beyond mere aesthetics, it was a matter of social identity. Different roles within the community had specific expectations regarding beard grooming. 1. Warriors. Expected to maintain a fearsome appearance, often sporting long, braided beards adorned with metal beads. Their grooming rituals were often communal, bonding them through shared practices. 2. Farmers and tradesmen. These individuals often sported shorter, more practical beards. Their grooming tools were simpler, with functional designs to reflect their hands-on lifestyles. 3. Skalds, poets. A skald's beard was often a canvas for creativity, with embellishments signifying their artistic status. Their grooming might include oils infused with herbs, symbolizing their connection to the divine. 4. Women. While not directly involved in beard grooming, women played a crucial role in the upkeep of family grooming tools, often crafting combs and preparing oils. ##### technical specs and inventories. Understanding the technical specifications of Viking grooming tools gives insight into their sophistication and craftsmanship. 1. Combs. Dimensions, typically around 15 centimeters in length, with tines spaced about 3 millimeters apart for effective detangling. Designs, some featured double-sided functionality, with one side for coarse combing and the other for finer detailing. 2. Razors. Weight. Average razors weighed between 50 to 100 grams, allowing for ease of use. Blade length. Ranged from 5 to 10 centimeters, designed for precision and ease of handling. 3. Scissors. Length. Often about 20 centimeters in total length, with blades approximately 8 to 10 centimeters long, ideal for snipping stray hairs. 4. Beard oils. Ingredients. A typical blend might include flaxseed oil, beeswax, and essential herbs, prepared in small batches to ensure freshness. Packaging. Stored in hand-carved wooden containers, often decorated with intricate designs, showcasing the owner's status. ##### mortality rates, a grim reality. While grooming standards were being enforced, the harsh realities of Viking life meant that mortality rates were a constant concern. The Viking Age was fraught with dangers, from battles to harsh winters. 1. Life expectancy. Average life expectancy hovered around 30 to 40 years, with men often dying in battle or from injuries sustained during raids. Women typically lived slightly longer, with childbirth complications being a leading cause of death. 2. Causes of death. Injuries. A significant portion of the male population succumbed to injuries sustained in skirmishes, with estimates suggesting that up to 20% of deaths in some regions were battle-related. Diseases, epidemics, often exacerbated by poor hygiene practices, could wipe out entire communities. The plague of 1030 AD is estimated to have caused a mortality spike of up to 50% in certain areas. 3. Burial practices. The importance of grooming extended even into the afterlife. Vikings were often buried with their grooming tools, indicating the belief that a well-groomed appearance in the afterlife was paramount. Burial mounds were typically adorned with personal items, including combs, razors, and even vessels of oils, signifying the deceased's status and societal role. ###### The interplay of grooming and mortality. The grooming standards of the Vikings were not merely superficial. They reflected a society that valued aesthetics and personal care, even amid the precariousness of life. The rituals surrounding grooming were a blend of cultural pride and personal identity, acting as a buffer against the grim realities of mortality. 1. Cultural significance. A well-groomed beard was seen not only as a reflection of personal pride but also as a symbol of one's lineage and achievements. The more elaborate the grooming, the more stories could be told of the individual's exploits. 2. Community bonds. Grooming practices often involved communal gatherings, where warriors would share tales of their exploits while tending to their beards, fostering a sense of camaraderie and shared identity. 3. Adaptation and resilience. The ability to maintain grooming standards in the face of adversity speaks volumes about Viking resilience. Even as mortality rates soared, the cultural emphasis on appearance remained steadfast, showcasing a society that found joy in the little things, even if it was just a well-groomed beard. ##### Conclusion. The saga of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates is a tale woven with threads of artistry, practicality, and social structure. The meticulous care they took in grooming their beards signifies a deeper cultural significance, revealing much about their values and societal norms. Simultaneously, the harsh realities of mortality rates acted as a somber backdrop to these personal rituals, reminding us that life during the Viking Age was as fleeting as a well-groomed beard in a fierce battle. In the end, while we may chuckle at the notion of beardless blunderers, and the intricate rituals surrounding beard care, it's essential to recognize that these practices were not merely about aesthetics. They were about identity, status, and the enduring human spirit, even in the face of an uncertain world. After all, in the words of an unknown Viking, a well-groomed beard may not win you a battle, but it certainly wins you respect, unless, of course, you're on the wrong side of an axe. The monotonous history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates. In the annals of history, few cultures have been as romantically misinterpreted as the Vikings. While we often picture them as wild warriors with flowing blonde hair and plaited beards, the reality is far more nuanced. Their grooming standards, especially for facial hair, were as intricate as their shipbuilding methods, and their mortality rates tell an equally captivating story rooted in their daily lives. Construction methods, materials, costs, 800 to 1000 AD. The Viking Age, spanning from approximately 793 to 1066 AD, was not just an era of raiding and pillaging, it was also one of remarkable craftsmanship. Viking longhouses, made primarily from timber, were constructed using a technique known as post and beam. This involved digging deep holes, placing sturdy wooden posts, and then filling the spaces with wattle and daub, a mixture of woven branches and mud, creating a warm, insulated dwelling. Materials. The primary materials were locally sourced oak and pine, which were plentiful in Scandinavia. These woods were not only durable but also easily shaped with the tools of the time, including axes and chisels. The cost? Well, let's just say it wasn't a matter of coin but rather a matter of community effort. Construction sites were bustling with families, neighbors, and sometimes even rival clans working together, often in exchange for future favors or goods. Costs in context. The true cost was measured in labor hours rather than currency. A modest longhouse could take a month to construct, requiring dozens of man-hours. For the bearded Viking, the upkeep of such a home included not only the physical structure but also the aesthetic maintenance, like ensuring that the beard, often the pride of their manhood, was well-groomed. Bureaucratic rules and punishments. Viking society, contrary to popular belief, was not a hellish free-for-all where might made right. The legal framework, known as the Thing, was a public assembly where laws were passed and disputes settled. Here's where beard grooming gets its mention. Rules. There were edicts about cleanliness and personal grooming. For instance, a well-groomed beard was a sign of status, thus, neglecting one's beard could be seen as a sign of disrespect. In some regions, the law stipulated that a man must maintain his beard, lest he face penalties. A scruffy beard could result in fines or even ostracism from the community. Punishments. These were swift and, in some cases, brutal. A man found flaunting an unkempt beard could be subjected to a fine of up to 3 sheep or a hefty sum of silver, an economic blow to many. A witty aside here, in the Viking world, it seems that a bad beard could cost you more than a bad haircut. #### roles and job descriptions. Viking society was stratified, with roles that extended beyond the fearsome warrior stereotype. 1. Beard care specialist, or skegmer, not just an artisan. These individuals were revered for their ability to shape and embellish facial hair. Equipped with combs made from animal bones and oils from fish and nuts, their trade was essential. 2. Shipwrights, responsible for building the longships that enabled Viking raids and trade. They were skilled craftsmen who understood hydrodynamics, even if they didn't call it that. Their tools included axes, chisels, and adzes, and they often doubled as barbers in their spare time. 3. The farmers, the backbone of Viking society. They were responsible for producing food to sustain the community. A good beard was a mark of a healthy farmer, as it indicated the man could afford the time for grooming amidst the hard labor. 4. Warriors. A warrior was expected to maintain a fierce yet tidy appearance. The grooming of beards was seen as an essential part of preparation for battle. After all, nothing strikes fear into the hearts of enemies quite like a well-coiffed beard. #### technical specs and inventories. When it comes to beard grooming, the Vikings were surprisingly sophisticated. A typical grooming kit could include combs, often made from bone or wood. They were intricately carved and sometimes adorned with symbols of protection. There's nothing like a good luck charm to ensure your beard remains untangled through battle. Oils, derived from natural sources like fish fat, nuts, and herbs, these were crucial for keeping beards hydrated and manageable. The scent of juniper or spruce was particularly favored, leading to the fragrant aura of a Viking warrior. Shears and knives. Viking shears were not just tools, they were often passed down generations, with intricate designs etched into the handles. A Viking with a dull knife was akin to a knight with a rusty sword, simply unacceptable. Beard rings. These decorative pieces were often made from bronze or silver and used to bind the beard into braids. Not merely ornamental, they served to keep the beard tidy and tangle-free during both raids and feasts. #### mortality rates, the grim reality. Despite their robust appearances and fierce reputations, the Vikings faced staggering mortality rates, a grim reality hidden beneath their tales of valor. 1. Infant mortality. Estimates suggest that around 30% of infants did not survive past their first year, primarily due to harsh living conditions, diseases, and the lack of advanced medical care. 2. Adult mortality. For adult males, the average life expectancy hovered around 40 years. A warrior who survived battles often succumbed to infections from wounds or diseases such as dysentery and the plague. 3. Women's mortality. Women, often tasked with childbirth and domestic duties, faced their own set of perils. Mortality during childbirth was high, with approximately 10% of women succumbing to complications. 4. Death in battle. While romanticized in sagas, the reality was that the majority of warriors died young, many before reaching their prime. The Viking diet, while rich in fish and grains, lacked essential nutrients, further contributing to their short lifespans. Conclusion, a mixed legacy. The Vikings left behind a complex legacy. Their grooming standards, while seemingly trivial, reflected the values of their society: pride, honor, and a deep connection to the community. The meticulous maintenance of their beards was indicative of their status and role in society, a blend of artistry and practicality. On the flip side, their mortality rates cast a shadow over their fierce reputation. The Vikings were warriors, craftsmen, and family men, but they were also victims of their environment and the brutality of life. In the end, the history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates is a tapestry woven with threads of craftsmanship, community, and the harsh realities of life. The next time you think of the Vikings, remember, behind every magnificent beard was a story, of grooming, of love, and sometimes, of a rather unfortunate encounter with a rogue sword. The monotonous history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates. Ah, the Vikings! Those seemingly brutish marauders of the north, sailing through the seas with all the subtlety of a drunken walrus. But did you know that beneath their fearsome exteriors lay a complex society with a penchant for meticulous grooming, particularly when it came to their beards? Yes, dear reader, today we embark on a journey through the bearded labyrinth of Viking grooming standards, mortality rates, and the bureaucratic minutiae that would make even the most patient accountant weep into his ledger. Regional variations over time, a beard for every occasion. As we sift through the annals of history, while trying not to be suffocated by the smell of stale mead, we quickly discover that Viking beard standards were as varied as their battle tactics. In the rugged fjords of Norway, for instance, beards tended to be longer and more flowing, much like the dramatic scenery. It was practically a requirement. After all, a short beard could be mistaken for a sign of cowardice, akin to wearing a pink tutu into battle. Conversely, the Danes preferred a more Spartan look. Their beards were often trimmed to precision, possibly to keep them from getting caught in the rigging of their longships. And let's not forget about the Swedes, whose beards were often braided into intricate designs, resembling the very roots of Yggdrasil, the tree of life. These braided beards were not just for show, they served as a status symbol. The more elaborate the braid, the more likely you were to be invited to the best feasts, assuming you survived the raid, of course. Laws, edicts, taxes, and ledgers, the bureaucratic beard. As civilization crept into the Viking Age, like a cat burglar under the cover of darkness, so too did the need for laws and edicts concerning beard grooming. Yes, you read that right. The Vikings had laws about how to maintain your facial hair. In 1000 AD, a notable Viking chieftain named Bjorn, the tax collector, Halldórsson issued an edict stating that all men must keep their beards well-groomed, or face a hefty tax. One can only imagine the grumbling. What is this, a barbershop quartet? I thought we were pillaging. These laws were meticulously recorded in ledgers that would make any modern accountant's heart skip a beat. The ledgers contained everything from beard tax collections to the number of sheep sheared for wool, because let's be honest, what's a good beard without a cozy woolen cloak? The fines for unkempt beards ranged from minor penalties, such as the loss of a goat, to severe punishments, like being banished from the local meat hall. ### logistics and supply chains, the beard economy. You might be surprised to learn that the Vikings had a surprisingly robust supply chain for beard grooming. Picture it, longships laden with barrels of imported oils and fragrant herbs, because who doesn't love a hint of lavender in their beard? The trade routes were essential for the Viking economy, akin to the modern-day delivery apps we all know and love, though one can assume the logistics were a tad less efficient without GPS. The Vikings sourced their grooming products from various regions. Oils from the Mediterranean, beeswax from local hives, and even exotic spices from the East. Imagine a Viking merchant haggling over a jar of sandalwood oil. "I'll give you 3 goats and a boat for that." It wasn't all about pillaging, there was a delicate art to commerce, too. The supply chain for beard grooming was intricate. Beard oils needed to be shipped before they spoiled, and those itinerant merchants had to time their journeys with the changing seasons. During winter, when the fjords froze over, bearded men had to resort to whatever they could find, perhaps a concoction of fish oil and snow. It's a bit unclear, but it certainly would have made for some pungent beards. ### record keeping, the fine print of beard maintenance. Now, let's talk about the fine print, the record keeping that accompanied all this beard grooming. The Vikings were not just warriors, they were also meticulous record keepers, especially when it came to their beards. In fact, some scholars believe that the first form of accounting was inspired by the sheer complexity of tracking beard grooming standards. Viking skalds, poets, would often write verses about the grooming rituals of various chieftains, noting everything from the amount of oil used to the number of combs owned. A particularly beloved skald named Eirik the Wordy once wrote an epic about a chieftain's beard that took 5 whole cantos, each more elaborate than the last. Imagine that. A 5-canto ballad dedicated solely to the care of one man's facial hair, much to the chagrin of anyone who had to listen to it. And then there were the grooming competitions. Yes, those were a thing. Chieftains would gather to showcase their beards, with judges meticulously taking notes. "This beard is well-oiled but lacks volume," one judge might declare, while another might counter, "Ah, but look at the sheer length." ### a surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. As we meander through this bearded historical narrative, it feels only right to sprinkle in a touch of the grotesque to keep things lively. Picture this: a Viking chieftain named Ragnvald, the Unkempt, was notorious for his wild beard, which was so long and unruly that it became a breeding ground for all manner of critters, yes, critters. One fateful day, during a particularly raucous feast, Ragnvald stood up to regale his followers with tales of glory. As he gestured animatedly, a small bird, having made a cozy nest in his beard, took flight. The guests gasped in horror and delight, unsure if they should laugh or run for cover. Ragnvald, oblivious to the chaos, continued his tale, only to be interrupted when the bird decided to make a dramatic return, swooping down to perch on his shoulder. The moral of this tale: keep your beard groomed, or you might end up as the unwitting star of a grotesque comedy skit. #### Conclusion: beards, bureaucracy, and the Viking legacy. In conclusion, the beards of the Vikings tell a tale of their own, one that encompasses regional variations, intricate laws, well-organized supply chains, and a surprising penchant for record-keeping. The grooming of facial hair was not merely a matter of aesthetics, it was tied to identity, status, and, of course, survival in a world where looking fierce could mean the difference between life and death. As we reflect on the bearded legacy of the Vikings, we're reminded of the absurdity of it all, the laws that governed their grooming, the meticulous records they kept, and the sheer number of anecdotes that could make even the most stoic historian chuckle. So, the next time you find yourself pondering the fate of the Vikings, remember, it was not just their axes that made them legendary, but their magnificent beards as well. #The monotonous history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates. Ah, the Vikings! Those bearded marauders of the north who seemed to have a penchant for long ships, long swords, and, most importantly, long beards. When you think of them, it's hard not to envision a crew of rugged warriors charging through the snow, axes glinting in the pale Scandinavian sun, their beards flowing majestically in the wintry breeze. But let's peel back the layers of this hairy subject and dive into the surprisingly dull yet surprisingly complex world of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates. ## Regional variations over time, the beard spectrum. Let's start with the geography of the beard. In the Viking Age, roughly 793–1066 AD, for those who didn't pay attention in history class, beards were not just a style choice, they were a cultural statement. Vikings from different regions had distinct grooming practices that often reflected their societal norms, economic conditions, and even local weather. In Sweden, for instance, the beards tended to be long and flowing, almost like they were competing with the local forests in terms of volume. The Swedes had an affinity for braiding, perhaps because they were always preparing for the next raid and needed to keep their facial hair out of their eyes while swinging an axe. In contrast, the Norwegians favored a more pragmatic approach, shorter, more manageable beards, likely influenced by their seafaring lifestyle where the ocean spray and wind could wreak havoc on one's grooming standards. Meanwhile, the Danes were somewhere in the middle, sporting beards that were neither too long nor too short, likely reflecting their indecisive nature regarding raids, trade, and occasionally, their choice of pants. As time drudged on, the Viking Age was not exactly a fast-paced thriller, grooming standards evolved. By the end of the 10th century, with the spread of Christianity and the increasing influence of European norms, beards began to take on more of a clean-cut vibe. Picture it, a once proud warrior now sporting a tidy, trimmed beard, perhaps even adorned with a decorative clasp or two. Some might argue this was the beginning of the end for Viking masculinity, but hey, even the fiercest warrior has to keep up with the latest trends. ## Laws, edicts, taxes, and ledgers, the bureaucratic beard. If you thought the Viking Age was all about raids and revelry, think again. It was also a hotbed of edicts, laws, and, yes, taxes, because nothing says, "I'm a fierce warrior," quite like filling out forms. The Vikings had a surprisingly sophisticated legal system, complete with the infamous thing, a local assembly where free men gathered to discuss matters of state, including, you guessed it, beard grooming standards. In 10th century Norway, King Harald Fairhair, eager to unify his kingdom, issued a rather peculiar edict that mandated all men to keep their beards neatly trimmed. This was ostensibly to promote a sense of order in his new realm. This law was enforced with the same zeal that one might apply to hunting down a particularly elusive fjord trout. The penalties for noncompliance. A fine that would set you back a few sheep, because, naturally, sheep were the primary currency of the time. But the irony here is thick. The very men who were feared on the battlefield for their wild, unkempt beards were now being taxed and regulated like they were a bunch of unruly schoolboys. In the annals of Viking record-keeping, one ledger, the Skaldic tax rolls, stands out as a testament to this absurdity. Entries meticulously logged the beards of local chieftains and their taxes, including a line item for beard maintenance. A classic example reads, Eirik the Red, 10 sheep for the beard, 5 for the tunic, 2 for the questionable haircut. Talk about hairy situations. Hashtag logistics and supply chains, the beard economy. Now let's dive into the nitty-gritty of logistics and supply chains. Yes, the Vikings were known for their longships, but they were also surprisingly adept at the art of beard maintenance logistics. You see, maintaining a beard in the harsh Scandinavian climate required a veritable cornucopia of grooming supplies, oils, combs, and sometimes, even the occasional decorative bead. Trade routes were established not just for spices and silks but also for grooming essentials. The Vikings were great traders, and they had a keen eye for quality beard oils. These were often made from locally sourced materials, think fish oil mixed with bits of lichen and maybe a hint of wildflower for that, just rolled out of a fjord, scent. A particularly popular route extended from the Baltic Sea to the lush forests of the British Isles, where they trade furs and timber for exotic grooming supplies. Let's not forget about the role of beeswax, a vital component in the grooming industry. Beeswax combs were a prized possession, allowing Vikings to detangle their beards after a long day of pillaging. This led to a thriving bee economy, with beekeepers becoming the unsung heroes of the Viking Age. Imagine a bearded warrior returning from a raid, not with gold and silver, but with a bounty of honey and beeswax to keep his beard looking pristine. Now that's a plot twist worthy of a saga. Hashtag record keeping, the dull but necessary. You might think that record keeping in the Viking Age would be as thrilling as watching paint dry, but it was essential, especially when it came to beards. The Vikings were meticulous about documenting their grooming practices, which has led to a surprising wealth of information about their standards. One notable record-keeping practice was the beard ledger, an ancient scroll that tracked the grooming habits of prominent Viking figures. Each entry detailed not just the length and style of a beard but also the grooming products used. We can only imagine the entries. Olaf the Brave, beard lustrous and long, oiled with seal fat, combed thrice with a fine-tooth comb. This was the original version of Instagram, a way for Vikings to show off their beard game. The records also included mortality rates associated with beard care. Yes, you read that right. The Viking Age was fraught with dangers, and beard grooming was not without its hazards. The Beard and Mortality Register listed unfortunate incidents where grooming mishaps led to tragic ends. For instance, a particularly harrowing account tells of Bjorn the Bold, who met his untimely demise when his beard became ensnared in the rigging of his longship during a storm. The poor man was dragged overboard, never to be seen again, leaving behind a legacy of both bravery and a cautionary tale about the perils of excessive beard length. ## the surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. As we wrap up this rather hair-raising journey through the annals of Viking history, it would be remiss not to share a particularly grotesque anecdote that perfectly encapsulates the absurdity of their grooming standards. Picture this: it's a cold, blustery morning in the winter of 920 AD. Our hero, Sigurd the Stinky, a nickname earned not for his lack of bravery but for his famously unkempt beard, decides to take a trip to the local thing to discuss the new beard tax. Unbeknownst to him, his beard has become a veritable ecosystem of its own. As he stands up to speak, a particularly bold squirrel, perhaps attracted by the lingering scent of the dried fish he had consumed for breakfast, leaps from his beard onto the shoulder of a rather unimpressed chieftain. Chaos ensues. The chieftain, unable to stifle his laughter, loses his composure and accidentally knocks over a ceremonial cup of mead, which, in turn, spills all over the ornate scroll detailing the latest beard edicts. The scroll is ruined, and a new law is hastily drafted that day: no beards over a certain length during official gatherings. The moral of the story: sometimes, a beard can be your greatest asset or your most embarrassing liability. And there you have it, the monotonous yet surprisingly complex history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates. From regional variations and bureaucratic nonsense to trade routes and startling anecdotes, it seems that beneath all that hair, there lies a rich tapestry of culture, absurdity, and perhaps a touch of tragedy. So, the next time you see a well-groomed beard, take a moment to appreciate the centuries of evolution, logistics, and yes, even the occasional squirrel that may have contributed to it. ### The monotonous history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates. The Vikings. Renowned for their seafaring prowess, pillaging, and, of course, their magnificent beards. Picture a Viking, towering, fierce, with hair cascading down his chest, and a beard that could rival the thickest of woolen blankets. But beneath this rugged visage lies a less glamorous chronicle, a tale of grooming standards, mortality rates, and the bureaucratic minutiae that would make even the most seasoned accountant yawn in disbelief. ### Regional variations over time, the beard tapestry. Let's start at the roots, shall we? The Viking Age, roughly 793 to 1066 AD, was not just about conquests and glory, it was also a time of regional variation that would make even a hipster's artisanal beard oil seem standard. In Norway, the beards tended to be long and wild, reflecting the rugged terrain and the inability to find a decent barber. Meanwhile, in Sweden, the beards were more refined, perhaps the result of a thriving trade with the civilized world, those fancy French barbers and their fine grooming tools. However, the beards of the Danes were a whole different story. They took the less is more approach, favoring a neatly trimmed look that screamed, "I may pillage your village, but I have a grooming appointment at 3 p.m. The differences in grooming standards were not merely aesthetic, they were also culturally significant. A well-groomed beard signified social status, while a scraggly beard was often interpreted as a sign of bad luck, or worse, a lack of ambition. Hashtag laws, edicts, and taxes, the beard tax. If you think today's tax code is convoluted, you should take a gander at the Viking Age legislation surrounding beards. In 10th century Norway, King Harald Fairhair issued the first known beard tax. Yes, you read that correctly, beard tax. This law was aimed at encouraging a certain level of grooming and style among the populace. Failure to comply could result in hefty fines, and let's face it, a Viking with a scruffy beard was probably already on thin ice with the law. Now, imagine being a tax collector back then, wandering through villages, inspecting beards as if they were fine wines. Ah, I see you've opted for the wild and untamed look, my good man. That'll be 2 silver coins, please. It was a bizarre bureaucracy that turned personal grooming into a matter of state. The ledgers from this era, filled with detailed records of who paid what for which beard style, would make even the most stoic accountant weep with boredom. Hashtag logistics and supply chains, the beard oil economy. But how did Vikings maintain their impressive beards amidst all that raiding and pillaging? Enter the logistics and supply chains of beard care. You see, the Vikings were not just marauders, they were also savvy entrepreneurs. They established trade routes that stretched from the icy fjords of the north to the sun-soaked markets of the Mediterranean. Beard oil, made from a variety of natural ingredients, was a hot commodity. Imagine a bustling marketplace with Vikings haggling over the finest oils, each claiming superiority. This one's made from the rarest of herbs found only on the cliffs of Norway. Pfft, my oil is blended with essence of dragon's blood. It was a cutthroat market, one that would make today's beauty industry look like a kindergarten craft fair. The logistics of supplying these oils were no small feat. Vikings relied on their longships to transport their precious cargo, navigating treacherous waters while fending off rival traders. The supply chain was a delicate balance of risk and reward, with many a beard oil shipment going awry due to storms or pirate raids, ironically, often by other Vikings who deemed their beards too unkempt. Hashtag record keeping, the unexciting chronicles of beard grooming. As thrilling as the logistics of beard oil trade may sound, the record-keeping practices of the time were, frankly, mind-numbingly dull. The Vikings were not known for their meticulous documentation, but they did keep some records, primarily through runestones and sagas. These epitaphs often included details about notable warriors, their conquests, and, yes, occasionally, their grooming habits. One can only imagine the scribes sitting down to record the latest news. Today, Bjorn the Brawny conquered the village of Borg. Notable mention, his beard was impeccably oiled, despite the heavy rain. The villagers were left bewildered and enchanted. The sagas, while entertaining, often glossed over the mundane aspects of beard grooming, favoring tales of heroism and destiny over the nitty-gritty of combing techniques. Hashtag a surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote, the beard of death. Now for the piece de resistance, a surprising and somewhat grotesque anecdote that will make you reconsider your own beard grooming routine. In the depths of Viking lore, there's a curious tale of a warrior named Thorfinn the Unkempt. Thorfinn, known for his refusal to trim his beard, became somewhat of a local legend, not for his prowess in battle, but for the sheer size and unkempt state of his facial hair. During a particularly brutal winter, Thorfinn fell ill and, despite the best efforts of the village shaman, succumbed to his ailments. In a twist of fate that even the most depraved imagination couldn't concoct, the villagers decided to honor Thorfinn by burying him with his beard intact, lengthy, tangled, and laden with the remnants of past feasts. As the story goes, weeks after Thorfinn's burial, a particularly bold crow was spotted perched atop his grave, tugging at his beard as if it were a prized fishing net. It turns out that Thorfinn's beard had become a nesting ground for various insects, some of which reportedly began to thrive in the thick, oily strands. This bizarre turn of events led to the villagers coining the phrase, "A beard is a home, not just a style." In the end, Thorfinn's beard became a cautionary tale. The lesson was clear: while a magnificent beard could win battles and hearts, neglect could lead to a rather grotesque afterlife. Hashtag conclusion, the legacy of Viking beards. So here we are, having navigated the somewhat monotonous history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates. From the regional variations that define grooming styles, to the bewildering bureaucracy of beard taxes, through to the logistics of beard oil supply chains, and finally to the drudgery of record-keeping, we've seen how these hairy warriors balanced their rugged lifestyle with the demands of society. Let us not forget the curious case of Thorfinn the Unkempt, whose beard became a legend in its own right. The Vikings may have left behind a legacy of conquest and exploration, but they also bequeathed us a rich tapestry of beard-related tales, some noble, some absurd, and others downright grotesque. So, the next time you gaze upon your own reflection in the mirror, perhaps consider not just the grooming standards of today, but the weighty history that hangs from the strands of your own beard. Who knows? You might just be a descendant of Thorfinn the Unkempt, destined to leave your own mark on the world, one beard oil application at a time. The monotonous history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates. When one conjures images of the Vikings, the mind is often seized by visions of burly warriors with flowing beards, brandishing swords and shields, and wreaking havoc on hapless coastal villages. However, what often goes unnoticed is the intricate tapestry of beard grooming standards that varied regionally, changed over time, and was, believe it or not, punctuated by an alarming array of mortality rates. The Vikings were not merely marauders, they were also the founders of a bewildering bureaucratic system that involved laws, edicts, and an entire alphabet soup of ledgers, all dedicated to the art of beard management and the grim statistics of life and death. ##### Regional variations over time. First off, let's dive into the hair-raising topic of regional variations. Picture, if you will, the Vikings as they roamed from the icy fjords of Norway to the sun-kissed shores of England and beyond. As they ventured into different lands, they didn't just bring their axes, they brought their grooming habits. This is where the true complexity of Viking beard culture emerges. In Norway, for example, the Viking beards tended to be long and unkempt, reflecting the rugged landscape and even more rugged lifestyles. It was as if each beard was a testament to the harsh winters, a veritable woolly shield against the biting winds. Meanwhile, in Sweden, the grooming standards took a different route. Swedes were known for their more meticulous approach, adopting styles that involved braiding and ornamentation. The Viking facial hair looked less like a battle-ready weapon and more like a fashion statement worthy of a catwalk, if catwalks existed in 800 AD. Now let's not forget Denmark, where Vikings took to beard grooming with the fervor of 1,000 barbershop quartets. Here, laws were enacted that dictated not only how long a man could grow his beard but also how often it should be trimmed. Yes, you heard that right. The law of the land dictated the length of your facial hair. Talk about a hairy situation. This regional variation continued to evolve as trade routes opened up and cultures collided. By the time the Vikings were sailing across the Mediterranean, the cross-pollination of grooming products led to an explosion of styles. Imagine a Viking picking up a bottle of olive oil in exchange for a few pelts. This wasn't just commerce, it was the dawn of beard oil. #### laws, edicts, taxes, ledgers. Of course, the Viking love for beards did not come without its bureaucratic baggage. Enter the realm of laws, edicts, and taxes, where beard grooming standards were as rigidly enforced as taxes on imported spices. The Viking Beard Code, if you will, was a series of regulations that dictated everything from how to trim your beard to how much you could tax your neighbors for the right to borrow your beard combing comb. The most famous of these edicts was passed in the late 9th century, known as the Beard Tax of 865 AD. According to various historical sources, which we'll pretend are entirely credible, this tax was levied to fund the construction of great longships, the likes of which could sail faster than a gossiping village. Those who failed to comply with this tax were subject to not only a hefty fine but also public humiliation. Nothing says pillage and plunder like being forced to stand in the village square with a poorly groomed beard for all to see. It was the ultimate shaming ritual, a grooming nightmare. As for record keeping, let's just say the Vikings were nothing if not diligent. Ledgers were filled with meticulous notes on who paid their beard taxes and who didn't. Some enterprising Viking scribes even developed a system of beard credits, allowing men to trade grooming services for tax reductions. In a society that valued strength and valor, the act of maintaining a well-groomed beard was elevated to a form of currency. The ledger became a vital tool in the Viking economy, where the value of a well-kept beard was recognized as a sign of social status. ### logistics and supply chains. Now, let's pivot to the logistics and supply chains that made all this beard grooming nonsense possible. You didn't think those Viking warriors were just raiding for gold, did you? No, they were also stealing the latest in beard grooming supplies. The resources were as diverse as the Viking raids themselves. From the scented oils of the Mediterranean to the fragrant herbs of the British Isles, the Vikings had a supply chain that would make modern-day logistics companies weep with envy. Imagine the scene: a Viking longship returns from a successful raid, not just laden with silver and jewels, but also with the finest grooming products. Ah, another shipment of rosemary oil from the south. Perfect for conditioning my beard, one warrior might exclaim, while another grumbles about the lack of quality combs from England. It was a veritable smorgasbord of grooming supplies at their fingertips. The supply chains were complex, involving trading networks that stretched across Europe and beyond. The Vikings were savvy merchants, and they quickly learned that a well-groomed beard could attract more allies than a well-honed sword. They began to export their own grooming products, leading to a beard care renaissance across Europe. Who knew that Viking raids could lead to such a fabulous beard revolution? ### record keeping with lots of specifics. Speaking of record keeping, let's delve into the specifics. The Vikings had a system that, while primitive by today's standards, was shockingly effective. They maintained detailed records of grooming practices, tax collections, and even the mortality rates of bearded men versus clean-shaven ones. Yes, you read that correctly. There are historical records that suggest a correlation between a man's beard length and his likelihood of surviving a raid. In one particularly detailed ledger from a small village in Norway, it was noted that of the 30 bearded warriors who went on a raid, 28 returned, while only 15 of the 20 clean-shaven warriors made it back. The theory among historians is that the longer beards provided some sort of insulation against the cold, while also serving as a distraction for enemies who might be inclined to grab a fistful of hair in combat. The records also indicated that mortality rates were surprisingly high among those who failed to adhere to grooming standards. A shocking 75% of the men who chose to forego the beard for a clean-shaven face met untimely ends, most notably due to the fact that they were often mistaken for locals and thus easily ambushed. The odds were stacked against the clean-shaven, and the Vikings took meticulous notes on every casualty. ###one surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. However, the crown jewel of this saga has to be the anecdote of one particularly unfortunate Viking named Bjorn the Hairy. Bjorn was known for his magnificent beard, a cascading waterfall of hair that left the villagers in awe and envy. However, his grooming habits took a turn for the grotesque during a particularly harsh winter. Faced with the prospect of starvation, Bjorn decided to use his beard as a storage vessel. Now, before you gag, let's clarify, Bjorn was not storing food in his beard, but rather small knickknacks, tools, and even the occasional fish he had caught during a raid. Surprisingly, this wasn't too unusual. It was a practical way to keep one's belongings close at hand. However, the situation took a turn for the worse when a particularly rebellious seagull, drawn by the smell of fish, swooped down and got itself tangled in Bjorn's beard. The ensuing chaos led to Bjorn stumbling and falling into a nearby fjord, where he was promptly rescued by his comrades. But the story doesn't end there. As Bjorn emerged from the water, dripping wet and humiliated, the seagull was still flapping its wings, much to the amusement of his fellow warriors. From that day on, Bjorn became known as Bjorn the Fish-Beard, a title that followed him for the rest of his days. His beard grooming standards were forever questioned, and he became a cautionary tale for Vikings far and wide. Never underestimate the logistical capacity of a beard, or the wrath of a hungry seagull. #Conclusion. In conclusion, the history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates is anything but monotonous. It's a tale of regional variations, complex laws, and a supply chain that would make modern businesses blush. The meticulous record-keeping of the Vikings reveals a society that truly valued the art of grooming, while a surprising anecdote serves as a reminder that sometimes, even the most fearsome warriors can find themselves in hilariously grotesque predicaments. So, the next time you see a long-bearded fellow, remember, he might just be a descendant of Bjorn, the Hairy, and the weight of history rests squarely on those hairy shoulders. The monotonous history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates. The Viking Age. A time of daring explorations, epic battles, and, of course, a seemingly endless fascination with facial hair. But let's not get lost in the mythic tales of fire and sword just yet. Instead, let's dive deep into the astonishingly mundane world of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates, two subjects that, on the surface, may seem unrelated but are, in fact, two sides of the same horned helmet. Regional variations over time. To understand the beard grooming standards of our favorite Scandinavian marauders, we must first examine the regional variations that emerged over the centuries. While the Viking Age is roughly dated from 793 to 1066 AD, it is essential to acknowledge that Vikings were not a monolithic group, they were a patchwork of tribes, each with their own quirks and preferences, much like a modern-day family reunion where Uncle Lars insists on bringing lutefisk, while Cousin Ingrid just wants a gluten-free, kale-based alternative. In Norway, for instance, the Vikings were known for their penchant for long, flowing beards that could rival the most majestic of waterfalls. Legends say these beards were so majestic that they could serve as makeshift fishing nets, though you'd have to ask the fish how they felt about that. In contrast, the Swedish Vikings adopted a more practical and less flamboyant approach. Their beards were often trimmed to a respectable length, reflecting their more industrious nature. The Swedes, it seems, were less concerned with appearances and more focused on how much grain they could haul back from their raids, probably because they knew that, unlike their Norwegian cousins, they wouldn't scare off the livestock with their facial hair. Then there were the Danish Vikings, who took a middle ground. They groomed their beards with enough flair to be stylish but not enough to be mistaken for a walking bush. How astute of them! As time marched on, these regional differences evolved. By the late Viking Age, the influence of Christianity began to seep into the grooming standards, because nothing says piety like a well-groomed beard. Suddenly, the long, wild beards that once symbolized strength were often trimmed for a more refined appearance. The irony is palpable. The same folks who once raided monasteries for gold were now taking grooming tips from those very monks. Laws, edicts, taxes, and ledgers. Ah, laws and edicts, the backbone of every society, including those of the bearded brutes we call Vikings. It turns out that the Viking Age had its fair share of grooming regulations, which might come as a shock to those who imagine Vikings only cared about pillaging and plundering. In the 10th century, King Harald Bluetooth, arguably the most famous of the Danish kings, no Wi-Fi connection necessary, established the first official grooming edict. It mandated that all Viking men must keep their beards trimmed to a length that would not obstruct their vision when wearing a helmet. We can only imagine the chaos that ensued when an unkempt Viking tried to swing an axe, only to have his beard get caught in the helmet strap. If you think that's absurd, consider the taxes imposed on beards, which were collected in the form of beard dues. Yes, you read that right. The longer the beard, the heftier the tax. This led to a rather bizarre underground economy where Vikings would offer beard trimming services for a fee, allowing the less hirsute to evade the taxman. Talk about a hairy situation. Ledgers from the period reveal meticulous records of beard lengths alongside the corresponding taxes owed, as if the scribes had nothing better to do than jot down details of Viking facial hair. This week, Bjorn the Brave owes 2 chickens for his 3-foot beard, while Eric the Enigmatic owes just 1 chicken for his more moderate style. Logistics and supply chains. Now let's talk logistics. You might be wondering, what does beard grooming have to do with supply chains? Well, dear reader, everything. Maintaining those glorious beards required a veritable army of grooming products, and the Vikings were savvy enough to establish supply chains that would make modern-day logistics managers weep with envy. Across the fjords and through the forests, Vikings traded for essential grooming items, combs, scissors, and oils made from animal fat. It wasn't just about looking good, it was about being a well-groomed warrior ready for battle. Imagine a Viking with a tangled beard, lumbering into combat, only to trip over his own facial hair. Not exactly the stuff of legends. Records from trading posts indicate that a thriving marketplace existed, where beard oils and grooming tools were exchanged alongside the usual inventory of fur and cattle. These items were particularly sought after, especially in regions where the local beardsmen were less fortunate in their grooming endeavors. The logistics of beard grooming were so well organized that Viking traders often included grooming supplies in their longships, ensuring that no matter where they raided, they could keep their facial hair looking sharp. That's right, Vikings had a grooming kit on board, alongside their swords and shields. No one wants to venture into battle looking like they just rolled out of bed, even if that bed was a pile of hay in a raided farmhouse. Record keeping with lots of specifics. Let's delve into the nitty-gritty of Viking record keeping. As mentioned earlier, the Vikings were surprisingly meticulous when it came to documenting their lives. They kept ledgers that included everything from the number of sheep owned to the precise lengths of their beards. Historians have unearthed records that detail the grooming habits of specific individuals, which is both fascinating and mildly embarrassing for those who might have liked to keep their beard lengths private. One particularly amusing entry details the beards of the famed warriors from the village of Skjoldung. A scribe noted with apparent glee, "In the year of our Lord 965, Halfdan the Heavy sported a beard of no less than 4 spans, attracting the attention of both maidens and flies alike." Another ledger entry recounts the infamous Beard Festival of 1025, where the village of Uppsala celebrated its best bearded warriors with a grand feast. The records show that a staggering amount of mead was consumed, and one unfortunate soul, known only as Bjorn the Blunderer, attempted to fashion his beard into a makeshift drinking vessel. Spoiler alert, it didn't end well. One surprising, borderline grotesque anecdote. Now, dear reader, we arrive at the piece de resistance, an anecdote that is both surprising and just a tad grotesque. In the year 1000, a gathering of Viking chieftains took place in the remote village of Lofoten. The purpose? To settle a dispute over beard length that had escalated into full-blown warfare. Yes, you read that correctly, a war over beard length. During this gathering, a rather intoxicated warrior named Ragnvald decided to take matters into his own hands. In a fit of misplaced bravado, he proclaimed that he would demonstrate his beard's superiority by allowing the local blacksmith to use his beard as a measuring stick for a new sword. Naturally, this involved some questionable choices regarding the blacksmith's forge and a rather unfortunate incident involving molten metal. As fate would have it, Ragnvald's beard caught fire, resulting in a scene that can only be described as a combination of chaos and hilarity. The other warriors, far too busy laughing to help, watched as Ragnvald frantically attempted to extinguish the flames by rolling around in the mud. The aftermath was a sight to behold. Ragnvald emerged with a singed beard that resembled a charred broomstick, and the other warriors promptly dubbed him Ragnvald the Toasted. The incident was recorded in the village ledgers, and as a result, the infamous Beard of Flame became a cautionary tale passed down through generations, a reminder that while beards may be a source of pride, they can also be a source of embarrassment when combined with alcohol, blacksmiths, and poor decision-making. Conclusion. And so, we conclude our exploration of the surprisingly monotonous history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates. From the regional variations that shaped their aesthetics to the bizarre laws, logistics, and record-keeping practices that governed their lives, it's clear that the Viking obsession with facial hair ran deeper than mere vanity. It was a matter of identity, camaraderie, and the occasional singed beard. As we ponder the legacy of these bearded warriors, let us take a moment to appreciate the absurdity of their grooming habits, the hilarity of their anecdotes, and the reminder that even in the most chaotic of times, life, and beard care, marches on. So, whether you're a Viking at heart or just someone who appreciates a good beard, may your grooming standards be high and your mortality rates low. ### The monotonous history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates. When one thinks of the Viking Age, circa 793–1066 CE, images of fierce warriors, grand longships, and the dramatic landscapes of Scandinavia often come to mind. However, Tucked away behind these grand narratives lies a less romantic, yet equally fascinating aspect of Viking life, their grooming habits, particularly concerning beard care, and the surprisingly high mortality rates that accompanied them. #### Minor figures and petty rules. The Viking Age, like any historical period, was littered with characters who may not have achieved the notoriety of a Ragnar Lothbrok or a Bjorn Ironside but played their roles in the daily life and customs of the time. Take, for instance, a local chieftain named Bjorn the Bear, who ruled over a small fjord community in Norway. Unbeknownst to many, Bjorn implemented a peculiar grooming standard. He insisted that all men in his village grow their beards to a length of no less than 12 inches. This, he believed, would enhance their masculinity and inspire fear in potential foes. However, this rule had its consequences. Local lore recounts how the chieftain's son, Eric, found himself in a predicament. In 935 CE, after a fishing trip gone awry, he returned home with a beard severely singed from a poorly managed cooking fire. The villagers were scandalized. "What would the next raid think of our beardless warrior?" they exclaimed. Eric was promptly banished for a season, forced to redeem his honor by growing a new beard. Such unremarkable tales underscore the importance Vikings placed on grooming standards, with minor figures like Bjorn the Bear creating their own regulations that would ripple through their communities, often leading to bizarre and humorous consequences. #### Case studies with dates and lists. The Viking penchant for beards can be documented through various case studies, revealing patterns that inform us about their grooming standards and mortality rates. One notable study was conducted in 1020 CE on the island of Gotland, where the skeletal remains of over 200 Viking men were excavated. Archaeologists noted that nearly 75% of these men had significant dental wear, likely a result of their diet and lifestyle, which often included chewing rough fibers from their beards. This led to the hypothesis that a well-groomed beard was not only a mark of status but also a potential health hazard. In another analysis in 1000 CE, a group of Viking traders traveling to the Byzantine Empire was observed. They adhered to a strict grooming regimen, which included the use of a comb made from ox bone and scented oils derived from local herbs. A meticulous grooming routine was documented, highlighting the following items. 1. Beard combs, crafted from animal bones, often intricately designed. 2. Oils, derived from herbs and flowers to maintain beard health. Lavender and thyme were popular. 3. Scissors, small, iron blades used to trim stray hairs and maintain a sharp look. 4. Wash, a mixture of water and ash, which acted as a rudimentary soap. This meticulous attention to grooming was not merely aesthetic, it was also practical. A well-groomed beard could prevent lice infestations, a common concern given the close quarters in which Vikings often lived. However, the irony lies in the fact that even with these grooming habits, the mortality rates during this period remained astonishingly high. #### Comparisons to other regions. When comparing Viking grooming standards with other regions, it becomes clear that the Norse had a unique relationship with facial hair. In contrast, the Saxons, who lived in what is now England, adhered to a more utilitarian approach. A Saxon warrior in the same era would often shave his beard entirely for practical reasons during battle, believing that a clean face would prevent enemies from grabbing their beards during combat. Furthermore, in the Islamic Golden Age, beards were highly venerated, often seen as a symbol of piety and wisdom. The grooming standards in the Islamic world were strict, as men were encouraged to maintain their beards, albeit in a more conservative style than the flamboyant Viking look. This cultural divergence raises an interesting question: how did varying religious and cultural beliefs shape the grooming practices of men in different regions? #Archaeological tidbits. Archaeological findings have shed light on the grooming habits of Vikings. In a dig at a burial site in Sweden, researchers uncovered a cache of grooming tools, including a collection of combs and razors made from iron and bone. One particularly intriguing find was a silver brooch designed to hold a beard in place, suggesting that Vikings were not only concerned with the length of their facial hair but also with its shape and style. Additionally, a 9th-century grave site in Norway revealed the remains of a warrior who had been buried with an elaborate grooming kit, including a rare Viking-era mirror. This indicates that self-presentation was crucial even in death, as the Viking belief in an afterlife would have meant that these men wished to maintain their appearance in Valhalla. #The mortality rates. The Viking Age was marked by perilous living conditions. Life expectancy during this period hovered around 30 to 40 years, with mortality rates significantly influenced by various factors, including war, disease, and harsh weather conditions. The grooming practices of Vikings, while seemingly trivial, had direct implications for their health. In a grim reality, a study conducted in 980 CE in the town of Birka revealed that a significant proportion of men died from infections caused by poor grooming habits. The Vikings' use of metal grooming tools, if improperly maintained, could lead to infections. It was found that nearly 20% of the skeletal remains examined bore signs of abscesses attributed to the use of unclean grooming instruments. Moreover, the violent nature of Viking society also contributed to their mortality rates. Between 793 and 1066 CE, the average Viking male experienced a 50% chance of dying in battle, a stark contrast to their grooming standards, which insisted on maintaining a polished appearance even in the throes of combat. Rhetorical questions. How could a society so focused on meticulous grooming standards overlook the dire consequences of their lifestyle choices? What does this reveal about the interplay between aesthetics and survival in a world fraught with danger? Conclusion. The history of Viking beard grooming standards is a peculiar yet revealing lens through which we can understand the complexities of Viking society. It sheds light on their values, social structures, and even the daily minutiae of their lives. While the primary focus of historical narratives often leans towards their conquests and explorations, the grooming habits and high mortality rates of these formidable seafarers remind us that beneath the veneer of warrior culture lay a society grappling with the everyday challenges of survival, health, and identity. As we delve deeper into the monotony of Viking grooming standards, we unearth a world where the trivial and the tragic are intricately woven together, allowing us to appreciate the rich tapestry of history that continues to shape our understanding of the Viking legacy. The monotonous history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates. The Viking Age, spanning from approximately 793 to 1066 CE, is often depicted as a time of fierce warriors, seafaring exploits, and conquest. However, beneath this romanticized veneer lies a surprisingly detailed tapestry of societal norms, including the grooming standards of Viking beards and their correlation to mortality rates. While many might find the idea of Viking beard grooming standards dull, the minutiae reveal a civilization rich in quirks and eccentricities, minor figures, and obscure rules that shaped daily life. #####minor figures and petty rules. While legendary figures like Ragnar Lothbrok and Bjorn Ironside dominate the Viking narrative, a cast of lesser-known characters played crucial roles in the everyday lives of these Norsemen. One such figure was Rolf the Hairy, a chieftain known for his elaborate grooming regimen, which included the use of beeswax mixed with crushed herbs to maintain his beard's luster. Rolf's obsession became a minor legend, inspiring a peculiar rule in his household. Any guest who failed to compliment his beard upon entry was immediately required to pay a fine of 1 silver coin. This notion of penalizing poor grooming etiquette was not unique to Rolf. Across various Viking settlements, local chieftains enforced petty rules concerning beard maintenance, often tied to social status. For instance, in the late 10th century, a law code from the Isle of Man dictated that a man with an unkempt beard faced social ostracism, while those sporting neatly trimmed facial hair were granted certain privileges, such as a higher standing in community gatherings. Such rules illustrate how grooming standards were intertwined with social hierarchies, extending even to the most mundane aspects of life. ####Case studies with dates and lists. To understand the evolution of Viking beard grooming, we can look at several case studies from different regions and periods. 1. The beard tax of 1066 CE. Following the Norman conquest, King William I introduced a beard tax that was intended to regulate the Viking population in England. This tax required men with beards longer than 6 inches to pay an annual fee. The tax was met with resistance, leading to numerous protests, including the infamous Beard Rebellion in York, where hundreds of bearded men marched in defiance of the decree. 2. The 9th century beard regulations in Norway. Archaeological findings from Norway have uncovered a set of grooming tools, including combs and razors, dating back to the 9th century. These artifacts suggest that a code of conduct existed concerning beard grooming. A local council in Vestfold established a formal decree in 873 CE that dictated the acceptable length and style of beards, indicating a societal emphasis on appearance. The decree listed acceptable styles: the Norse knot, the warrior's whiskers, and the merchant's mane. 3. The Saga of the Bearded Men, circa 950 CE, an obscure yet fascinating saga details the life of a group of Viking traders known as the Bearded Men of Gotland. This group meticulously documented their grooming routines, providing insight into the popular oils and balms used for beard care. The saga notes that these men preferred a mixture of fish oil and pine resin to keep their beards healthy, a practice that became a cultural hallmark in Gotland for generations. ### comparisons to other regions. When placed against the backdrop of other contemporary cultures, Viking beard grooming standards reveal both similarities and striking differences. In the Middle East, for example, the Islamic Golden Age saw the beard regarded as a symbol of piety and wisdom. Islamic scholars meticulously groomed their beards, often using scented oils and combs made of ivory. Unlike the Vikings, who sometimes viewed beards as a sign of virility and strength, in the Middle East, they were often considered a reflection of one's moral and spiritual state. In contrast, the Byzantine Empire had a rather ambivalent relationship with facial hair. Byzantine emperors often mandated clean-shaven appearances for their citizens, believing that a well-groomed face represented enlightenment and civilization. This sharp divergence in grooming standards between the Vikings and their contemporaries highlights how cultural values can shape perceptions of masculinity and social status. ###archaeological tidbits. Archaeological discoveries have provided a wealth of information regarding Viking grooming practices. In 2011, a Viking grave was unearthed in Sweden, containing a treasure trove of grooming tools, including a silver comb, scissors, and a variety of oils believed to have been used for beard maintenance. The grave also contained inscriptions in runes that suggested the deceased was a prominent figure in his community, with references to his noble beard and masterful grooming. Further excavations in Denmark revealed a unique artifact, a wooden frame containing a series of small hooks, theorized to be an early beard straightener. This device is emblematic of the lengths Vikings would go to ensure that their facial hair was not only presentable but also a point of pride. Some Viking settlements even featured communal grooming areas, akin to modern barbershops, where men would gather to exchange grooming tips and socialize. These archaeological findings underscore the significance of beards in Viking culture, serving as a canvas for self-expression and societal standing. ###mortality rates and grooming correlations. While it might seem far-fetched to connect beard grooming standards with mortality rates, historical data suggests an intriguing relationship. The 10th century saw a significant rise in mortality rates due to infectious diseases and poor hygiene practices among Viking populations. Interestingly, communities that prioritized grooming, often through social norms and regulations, showed lower mortality rates. For example, the town of Ribe, known for its strict grooming laws, reported a mortality rate of just 12% during the plagues that swept through Scandinavia in the late 900s. In contrast, neighboring regions where grooming standards were lax experienced mortality rates upwards of 30%. This correlation suggests a possible link between grooming practices and overall health, as those who maintained their beards were more likely to adhere to broader hygiene practices. ###rhetorical questions. How did something as seemingly trivial as a beard become a matter of life and death in Viking society? And what can the grooming habits of these fierce warriors tell us about their values, beliefs, and social hierarchies? ###conclusion. The history of Viking beard grooming standards may initially appear monotonous, yet it unfolds into a rich narrative characterized by minor figures, petty rules, and intriguing case studies. From tax-induced rebellions to archaeological discoveries that illuminate grooming rituals, the importance of facial hair in Viking culture cannot be overstated. It reflects not only personal identity but also societal norms that shaped the lives and deaths of these legendary Norsemen. While the Viking Age may be long gone, the stories of their beards continue to captivate our imagination, bridging the gap between the mundane and the extraordinary in history. The monotonous history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates. The Viking Age, spanning roughly from 793 to 1066 CE, is often romanticized as a time of savage warriors and fearless explorers. However, beneath this glorified veneer lies a lesser-known aspect of Viking life that was both fascinating and surprisingly meticulous: beard grooming. This seemingly mundane subject opens a window into the social structures, health standards, and even mortality rates of these Norse adventurers. The grooming of beards, often an indicator of a man's status and health, reflected a complicated interplay of personal pride, societal expectations, and cultural norms. #minor figures and petty rules. While we often hear about the legendary heroes like Ragnar Lothbrok and the infamous raids on England and France, countless minor figures shaped Viking culture, including those responsible for setting grooming standards. Among them was a lesser-known ruler named King Harald Hardrada, who, despite his grand ambitions, was also a proponent of strict grooming regulations within his court. He is said to have issued the Grooming Edict of 1040, which mandated that no warrior could attend court with an unkempt beard. Such minor figures and their idiosyncratic rules reveal the importance of grooming standards in social hierarchy. Moreover, the beard tax, introduced by King Olaf II of Norway in 1023, targeted those who flaunted their facial hair without adhering to the accepted grooming standards. This tax, while ostensibly aimed at raising revenue, was also a means for the king to enforce conformity among his subjects, reflecting the larger trends of governance and societal control during the Viking Age. ###Case studies with dates and lists. To better understand the significance of beard grooming, let us consider some enlightening case studies from the Viking Age. 1. The Beard Wars of 990 to 995 CE, a conflict between two rival factions in what is now Denmark arose over differing opinions on beard length. One faction, led by the nobleman Bjorn the Braided, advocated for long, flowing beards adorned with intricate braids, while the opposing faction, the clean-shaven clan, argued for a more streamlined appearance. This conflict culminated in the Battle of Flaxen Fields, where anecdotal evidence suggests that the length and style of beards became a rallying point. 2. The Great Beard Contest of 1022 CE, held in the town of Uppsala. This contest drew competitors from all over Scandinavia. The event included categories such as longest beard, most elaborate braid, and best ornamentation. An estimation of 300 competitors participated, with the winner, Eric the Elegant, boasting a beard that measured over 2 feet in length, adorned with silver rings and braided with blue-dyed threads. The contest was not merely a display of personal pride, it was a social event that reinforced community ties and cultural values surrounding grooming. 3. The Beard and Health, Studies of 950-1000 CE, archaeological finds have revealed that Viking men who maintained well-groomed beards had a lower incidence of skin infections, likely due to the use of natural oils derived from local flora. A study of skeletal remains from burial sites in Norway indicated that individuals with unkempt facial hair showed signs of higher mortality rates from infections, which can be traced back to the neglect of grooming. This connection between beard grooming and health elucidates the practical implications of personal care in the Viking Age. Comparisons to other regions. Beard grooming standards among the Vikings stood in stark contrast to those of contemporaneous cultures. For example, in the Byzantine Empire, facial hair was often seen as a sign of wisdom and piety. Byzantine men grew their beards long and unkempt as a reflection of their devout nature, a concept that differed significantly from the Vikings, who associated their beards with martial prowess and personal pride. In contrast, the Islamic Golden Age, around the same period, also emphasized the significance of facial hair. Islamic scholars and warriors maintained well-groomed beards as a sign of masculinity, but they also adhered to specific religious norms regarding grooming. This cross-cultural analysis highlights how the act of grooming transcended mere aesthetics and was deeply intertwined with identity, health, and societal expectations. Archaeological tidbits. Archaeological findings have provided fascinating insights into Viking grooming habits. Excavations in York, England, have uncovered combs made from animal bones, often intricately carved with designs. These combs, dating back to the late 9th century, suggest that grooming was not a haphazard affair but a carefully considered aspect of daily life. Some combs found even contained residues of oils and waxes, indicating that Vikings were not only concerned with the aesthetics of their beards but also with their health and maintenance. Moreover, grave goods from burial sites have revealed that many Viking men were buried with grooming tools alongside their weapons and personal artifacts. This signifies that grooming was considered as essential to one's identity and societal role as martial prowess. When the remains of a Viking warrior were excavated in Norway, it was found that his grave contained not only a sword and shield but also a finely crafted grooming kit, suggesting that even in death, the Vikings took their grooming standards seriously. Rhetorical questions. But what does the meticulous care for beards reveal about Viking society beyond mere vanity? And how might the grooming habits of these fierce warriors serve as a mirror reflecting their health and mortality rates? The interplay of grooming standards and mortality rates. The connection between grooming standards and mortality rates in Viking society is a compelling narrative thread that runs through history. The beard and health studies have demonstrated that personal care directly influenced health outcomes. As previously mentioned, those who adhered to grooming standards experienced fewer infections and better overall health. The Viking practice of using natural oils and herbs for grooming had practical benefits, as these substances often contained antimicrobial properties. Therefore, the act of grooming became not just a social norm but a vital aspect of maintaining one's health. This suggests that while Vikings were often portrayed as brutish warriors, they possessed a nuanced understanding of personal care that was deeply intertwined with their survival. ##### A broader cultural reflection. The grooming standards of the Vikings also served as a reflection of their broader cultural values. In a society that placed a high premium on appearance and reputation, beards became a symbol of masculinity, honor, and social status. The Vikings, who often faced harsh environmental conditions, learned that personal grooming could serve as both a practical necessity and a means of social cohesion. Moreover, the differences in grooming practices between various cultures during the Viking Age reveal how interconnected human identity is with aesthetics. The varying perceptions of beards in different societies underscore the importance of cultural context. For the Vikings, a well-groomed beard was not merely an embellishment, it was a statement of one's identity, social standing, and even a reflection of health. ####Conclusion. The seemingly monotonous history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates reveals a rich tapestry of social norms, health practices, and cultural values that defined the Viking Age. Through minor figures and their petty rules, we glimpse the impact of grooming on societal hierarchy. The case studies highlight how grooming practices were not just about vanity but also practical considerations that influenced health outcomes. Comparative analysis with other regions provides a broader understanding of how grooming standards shaped identity across cultures. Archaeological discoveries add depth to our understanding, showcasing the tools and practices that Vikings employed in their daily lives. As we ponder the questions posed earlier, we see that the Vikings were more than just warriors. They were a society that understood the intricate relationship between grooming, health, and identity. The history of Viking beard grooming, though seemingly monotonous, is a fascinating narrative that invites us to reflect on our own grooming practices and their implications in our lives today. ###The monotonous history of Viking beard grooming standards and mortality rates. Introduction. The Viking Age, spanning roughly from 793 to 1066 AD, is often romanticized in popular culture as a time of fierce warriors, epic sagas, and daring maritime exploits. Yet, beneath this rugged exterior lay a surprisingly intricate social tapestry, where even the seemingly trivial matter of beard grooming standards became a subject of minor figures and petty rules. How did facial hair become a symbol of identity, and what does it reveal about mortality rates during this era? The answers may surprise you. Minor figures and petty rules. While the legendary figures like Ragnar Lothbrok and Ivar the Boneless dominate Viking lore, the everyday lives of lesser-known individuals reveal a plethora of regulations surrounding beard grooming. For instance, a lesser-known Viking chieftain named Bjorn, the Neat, of Hedeby, who lived around the mid-10th century, was known for his strict grooming standards. Bjorn instituted the Beard Code of 955, which mandated that all Viking men must wash their beards at least twice a week using a concoction of water and crushed herbs. Violators faced a fine of 3 sheep, a considerable penalty in a time when livestock was a measure of wealth. Moreover, the Viking sagas document instances of societal pressure regarding beard styles. The Fjorgen's Folly of 1020, a gathering of regional chieftains, saw heated debates over the appropriate length and thickness of beards. Some argued that a bushy beard represented virility and strength, while others insisted that a more trimmed appearance signified wisdom and restraint. This debate resulted in the Council of Beards, a gathering that established a guideline for acceptable beard lengths based on social rank, with warriors allowed longer beards than farmers. ##### case studies with dates and lists. To better understand the impact of grooming on mortality rates, let's delve into two notable case studies. 1. The case of Einar the Groomed, c. 990 AD. Background: Einar was a well-respected blacksmith known for his elaborate beard braiding. Grooming regimen: he adhered to strict grooming standards, washing his beard with a special blend of ash and lye to keep lice at bay. Mortality rate: at 45, Einar succumbed to a severe case of scabies, which ravaged his beard, leading to secondary infections. His death spurred a local movement to improve hygiene standards, which ultimately reduced scabies-related deaths in the region by 30% over the next decade. 2. The case of Freydis the Fierce, circa 1015 AD. Background: Freydis was a fierce shield maiden known for her fierce battles and equally fierce grooming habits. Grooming regimen: she was reputed to use a mixture of bear fat and wildflowers for conditioning, a practice she claimed kept her beard soft and free of tangles. Mortality rate: Freydis lived to be 60, quite an achievement for a warrior of her time. Her longevity was attributed to her rigorous grooming practices and a diet rich in omega-3 fatty acids from fish, leading to speculation that proper grooming indeed contributed to better overall health. ##### comparisons to other regions. The grooming standards of Viking beards can be contrasted with those of contemporary cultures. For instance, the Anglo-Saxons, who inhabited modern-day England, had a very different approach to facial hair. They were known for their preference for clean-shaven faces, associating beards primarily with barbarism. In 9th century England, King Alfred the Great issued a decree mandating that all nobles must remain clean-shaven to present a civilized appearance to foreign dignitaries. In contrast, the Byzantine Empire during the same period valued elaborate beards as symbols of wisdom and authority. The Byzantine Emperor Justinian II famously wore a beard adorned with jewels, a statement of both power and sophistication. This cultural divergence highlights how grooming practices were not merely personal choices but were deeply intertwined with social status and regional identity. ##### Archaeological tidbits. Archaeological findings provide fascinating insights into Viking grooming practices. In 2017, a team of archaeologists excavating a burial site in Norway discovered a well-preserved grooming kit believed to belong to a high-ranking Viking. The kit contained a bone comb, a small bronze mirror, and various tools for beard maintenance, including a unique blade used for trimming. The comb, adorned with intricate carvings of Norse animals, indicated that grooming was not only practical but also an art form. Moreover, hair samples taken from Viking burial mounds have revealed the presence of various substances, including remnants of herbs that were possibly used for scent or medicinal purposes. This suggests that grooming was a multifaceted endeavor, intertwining hygiene, aesthetics, and health. ##### The mortality connection. The link between grooming standards and mortality rates might seem tenuous at first glance, but the evidence suggests otherwise. Poor hygiene and neglect of personal grooming were contributing factors to a range of health issues in Viking society. In a 2015 study, researchers analyzed skeletal remains from various burial sites and found that individuals with well-groomed hair and beards had significantly lower incidences of parasitic infections and skin diseases. The study concluded that a culture of grooming likely contributed to improved health outcomes, which would have been especially critical in a society reliant on physical prowess and mobility. ##### Rhetorical questions to hook curiosity. What hidden narratives about masculinity and health might the grooming standards of Viking society reveal to us today? How might the social pressures surrounding beard grooming in the Viking Age reflect broader themes of identity and status that resonate even in modern grooming culture? ##### Conclusion. The history of Viking beard grooming standards serves as a microcosm of Viking society itself, complex, multifaceted, and deeply interconnected with issues of identity, health, and mortality. Far from being a trivial subject, these grooming practices provide valuable insights into the social dynamics of the time. Through the exploration of minor figures, petty rules, and case studies, we uncover a rich narrative that challenges our perceptions of the Viking Age. In a world that often prioritizes grand narratives and epic tales, the seemingly mundane aspects of grooming remind us that history is often found in the details. So, the next time you see a beard, consider the myriad stories it may hide, a legacy of culture, identity, and perhaps even mortality. The Vikings were not just warriors. They were also men who cared deeply about how they presented themselves, and in their grooming, we find echoes of our own modern struggles with identity, health, and conformity. And that's a wrap. We've zipped through today's topic like a caffeinated squirrel on roller skates, fast and full of surprises. Did you know that the average person spends 6 months of their life waiting for red lights to turn green? Talk about time on your hands. If you enjoyed this whirlwind of fun facts, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe for more, and drop a comment below. We love hearing from you. And if you're hungry for more knowledge, check out our related episodes right here. There's always more to explore. Oh, and don't forget to turn on loop so this episode plays on repeat until you drift off to dreamland. Sweet dreams and see you next time.